This week on the Sustainable Ministry Show, we are talking about the books we're currently reading and beginning a conversation about the volunteer process that we'll follow up on and wrap up next week. This is episode 43. We don't have Dibs. Well, friends, we are back again, the Sustainable Ministry Show, and we are going to follow up our volunteer conversation that we started last week. We're going to dig into that this week and kind of talk about volunteer processes and creating a needs list, a fishing pond, all that good stuff. But before we get started, I'm wondering, we're in the new year. Is there a book that you're in the middle of or something that you've been reading that you're taking in currently?
Yeah, so I have to admit that I'm not reading a ministry-related book or a leadership-related book. I'm actually reading a fiction series called Red Rising, and it's a trilogy. And I wish I even knew what the author's name was, but I'm drawing a blank. I am just in the beginning of the second book, and I don't even know what the name of that book is. I just know it's the Red Rising trilogy. But
it's about Pierce Brown, Melissa. If you look on the Google, it will tell you
there
this.
You go. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have to say, I love it. I love this book. If you like Ender's Game and the space theme that Ender's Game has, and you marry that with Hunger Games, that's what you get. You get this kind of, but it's neither of those books. It's something completely new, and I love it. I love it. I love it. I would recommend it to anybody from the ages of 16 up.
Melissa, are children fighting to the death in an arena for entertainment?
No, not well, and kind of sort of not really. It's there's a class. There's a kind of a caste system,
right?
And they are fighting for power, but it's not necessarily like Hunger Games where it's being broadcast to all the different.
Oh, you just get to do it as a. You just get to watch it as a voyeur through the book.
Yeah, there's a lot of violence, so that's why it's similar to Hunger Games, but it is in a league unto itself.
Cool.
Yeah, good stuff, and it's a male protagonist, not female.
Very cool.
Yeah. Good stuff. Love it.
Well, I'm reading Brian McLaren's new book. It is called The Great Spiritual Migration. It's doing a number of things. The main thing, though, is one of the big questions I think most churches are asking right now is what's next? Obviously, the spiritual landscape of America is changing. It's changed dramatically. It's changing even more dramatically, I think. We've seen, Pew studies and Barna studies and all these studies about how it's changing. And I think one of the questions most churches are asking is, so what do we do? How do we change? How do we look different? But at the same time, how are we still faithful to, what we feel like God is calling us to do, and faithful to the gospel? And McLaren engages that. He gives I think a very hopeful message in it. And it's a good book. It's classic McLaren. He gives a lot of really, really good ideas, and it's challenging. It helps you. It's not challenging in terms of the read. It's an easy read, but challenging in terms of what are some of the things that we think we value as opposed to things that really matter when we think about church and kind of our ecclesial life and in terms of kind of our general spirituality. So it's a good book. I recommend it.
Nice. Well, I am trying to finish up a book from my 2016 reading list. It's a biography of Jim Henson, just called Jim Henson. I had been wanting to read it, and man, that is a long, stinking book. It is huge, but it's also really fascinating. Somebody who's so creative and all that good stuff. So I'm right in the middle of that, and hopefully we'll finish that soon, because I'm putting together my 2017 reading list, and I'll share that with everybody. Probably post it on Facebook or something here soon. But I want to get this finished first.
That's awesome.
It's really good. If you grew up on the Muppets or the Muppet Show or the Muppet Movie or any of that, this is a really fascinating read about all of that.
So Brian, any really cool, because people like Jim Henson, Steve Jobs, people like that, they have just a different way their brain works. So any kind of cool creative insight that you've learned from the Jim Henson book?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that stood out to me, and I'm probably 2/3, maybe 25% or 75% through the book. There's never a moment in which he thought he had arrived or had made it. There's never a moment in which he felt like he had achieved success, whatever that is. And then throughout the book, there's a story about him. He was in London doing the Muppet Show. There's a couple stories that occasionally there was a group of them that would go to this casino at the end of a recording or end of a season. And any money he would use would be to then celebrate Christmas with his crew the next year. So anything he won. And throughout the book, there are those moments where he continues to give back and pour back into other people. I finished a story yesterday about a guy that was supposed to be fired. And he came into his office, and Jim got up out of his chair, walks over, hugs the guy, and says to him, "We love you, and we're so glad you're still on staff with us." Sent him off, and then the guy became who they wanted him to be.
That's awesome.
And the author says Jim was just never somebody who could deliver that kind of news. And in response would deliver something that was hopeful. So those are cool little things. And then, of course, he'd work with puppets, so his mind had to work differently regardless.
Yeah, he was great.
You know, the thing that Jim did not do was develop a real good recruitment process. That's not in this book anywhere.
That was such a seamless segue.
Did you like that?
I love that.
But it's something that we in the church need to be about, and need to be about this time of year. So when we're evaluating our recruitment processes, where do we start?
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, I know this sounds crazy. I know we haven't really talked about this, or we didn't rehearse this, but I think any good recruitment process needs to start with a calendar. The two, I think you need to be very clear about for what and for when you're recruiting your volunteers, and it's difficult to do that unless you actually have an idea of the whens and the whats you're going to be doing in the following year. So I know it's very easy, but not, especially when you're going up against, the church-wide calendar, if you're talking about specific programming calendars. But you at least need to have an idea of the whens and the whats behind the whom's you need.
Yeah, I would say it starts. I agree with that completely, because if you don't have a template in which to fill slots, you don't know what slots you need to fill, right? And you don't know how many people you need, so yeah. I would also say, for me, when I coach people, I talk about it begins with a shift in their attitude and how they think about recruitment. Most people work and think about recruitment in terms of a mindset and attitude of scarcity. How many can we get for this? What's the bare bones minimum? Can we even get somebody to do this? And when you start off, I mean, there's actually some science out there to back this up. When you start off in a mindset of scarcity, you set yourself up for scarcity. You set yourself up for less than. And so one of the things I would say is never ask what's the bare bones. Ask what we really need. Ask the question, what do we really need to make Sunday school work? What do we really need to make this retreat work? What do we really need to make Wednesday nights or Bible studies work? And be honest about those needs. If you really need five volunteers for this one event, then don't go in trying to recruit 3. Truthfully, go and try to recruit 7, and work from an attitude of abundance instead of an attitude of scarcity. And I think you'll see a lot of that change, because it seeps into how you talk to people. If you go into it not in a way of I'm sorry I have to ask you for this, or I don't want to inconvenience you. If you change that and switch it from that sort of talk into, hey, we got this really great opportunity. We think you're the perfect person for this. That's a whole shift of how that conversation starts and how the people you're recruiting will enter into it. So I think it starts with a mindset shift.
That's exactly right. Yes. Being able to observe and say, I just notice every single week in the sanctuary that you greet people.
Yep.
And we've got this position that would use that skill set.
Yep.
That's a different thing. And I really like what you're saying, Stephen, because if you go around your church and you say, we don't have enough volunteers.
That's right.
Actually producing a ministry that doesn't have enough volunteers just
right.
because of the talk, and people will adopt that same thought of, this is a place where we don't have enough volunteers. So then we work at less. But this is a place where people are called to serve, and they do it and love it. That begins, not that you would say it like that, but that begins to create a different setting.
That's right.
So we got the calendar. We've got this idea of then how many people we need in these different places. Sometimes we might call that thing a needs list, highlighting X number of Sunday school teachers, X number of small group leaders, committees that need this many people serving on them. Where do we go from there? Once you've got that, you kind of have this idea of who you need or what positions you need, what's the next step?
Well, and I think an important part of that, Brian, that I think most people probably know this, but it's important, I think, to say anyways, is especially when you're working with children and youth, there's a ratio that you want to have. So if you're estimating you're going to have 20 children in Sunday school, you need to go in and make sure you have the right ratio, right? And that whatever your protection policy is and that sort of thing, making sure that all of the needs that you've listed are in accordance with ratios and protection policies and all that. But beyond that, one of the things when I'm coaching folks that I encourage them to do at this point, once they understand who all they need, is to look at who all they have. Because if you have volunteers in your ministry who are doing a good job, who are finding their call in that ministry, and who are enjoying themselves and creating goodness, the next step is to re-up with those volunteers. I always recommend for folks to do that between December and January, to re-up with your current volunteers. And by re-up, I just mean having a conversation with them and saying, hey, you're doing a fantastic job teaching the Sunday school class or leading this Bible study. And I would love it if you would continue to do that starting in the fall. And what you do is by re-upping with your current volunteers, you go ahead and knock out a lot of those needs that you have before you even have to start recruiting. You have a built-in list there. So re-upping with volunteers is also a great way to pat them on the back and say, we love you, you're doing a great job, and we're proud of you.
I think the next step, Brian, is to what we call a fishing pond, is to create a big long list of potential volunteers within that you would like to see serving in your ministry. And I think we recommend making sure that the list is at least 3 to 4 times your need. Mm-hmm. So if you need to find 10 volunteers, then your list should probably be comprised of 30 to 40 people. To allow room for people to say no. That fishing pond, though, unfortunately, when people consider everyone who is possible to serve based upon what you think their giftedness is, often will have preconceived notions about that person's ability or desire to say yes or no. Let's use youth ministry as an example, because it's the easy one. Many people many staff people or volunteer leaders say, oh, well, Mrs. So-and-so can't possibly be interested in working with youth because, after all, she's heading up the altar guild. Therefore, we're not going to put her on our list. I think that's a big mistake, because Mrs. So-and-so, we don't know how the Spirit is moving in his or in her life. And we don't know if maybe she's been doing altar guild for 10 to 15 years and is really trying to, discern where else she might serve joyfully. And so if you think Mrs. So-and-so is gifted with youth and you think she'd be a great asset to the team, don't not put her on that list based upon your own preconceived notions about what she'd say in terms of an ask.
Yeah, and I'd have 2 things to say about that too, because I totally agree. I was just having a conversation with some folks on my staff here at the church I work at, and we were talking about recruiting, because we're in recruiting season right now, and we are in that place where, in terms of recruiting, where they have finished re-upping with their current volunteers and are moving into creating their fishing ponds. And one of the things I told them, because churches are notorious to do this. A lot of times people or ministries in the church will get, how should I say it? We'll get territorial about certain volunteers. And we'll say, well, no, they're a youth ministry volunteer. They, don't ask them. They're, I've already got dibs on them. The rule that I tell my staff is, unless they have already committed to re-up with you, no one has dibs on anyone. Because we're all trying to create ministry in the church. We're all going in the same direction with the same ultimate goal. And so don't call dibs on someone just because you think they should volunteer with you or they have in the past. Because just because they volunteered with you in the past doesn't mean they want to do it now. And we want to be able to put in front of them their options and say, hey, you know what? Children's wants you to work with them. Youth wants you to work with them. And we've got this this church-wide retreat in the spring that we'd love for you to be the major event coordinator for. Let them make the choice. Don't make the choice for them. We had a youth Sunday school teacher who had, I think she had probably taught for 15, 16 years. And she's one of those people, you just know year after year, she's going to be back, she's going to teach, you just know it. Well, instead of just, taking her for granted every year, I would ask her, hey, is this something you still want to do? Because we love you do a great job. And one year she said, I'm actually thinking I'd like to work with some young adults now. And it was liberating. It was beautiful because she told me, if you wouldn't have asked me, I would have just kept doing it. But I was starting to get kind of frustrated. And I think I want to work with a different age group. And it gave her the opportunity to continue in ministry and be fulfilled in it in a different area. So I think everybody has to agree. We don't have dibs. We're all working towards the same goal. So let's let the people who we're recruiting make the choice and us not make it for them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that thing can always feel, maybe not always, sometimes feels really daunting, right? Especially if you know you're going to need 50 people.
That's right.
Something. Always feels as daunting. Always like to get a few other people around the table and just pull out the list and ask everybody to come up with 5 names. Let's say you got 5 people around the table. You got 25 already. And most people could probably name 10 that they think would be good. And those folks are going to name people that you would probably not name.
Right.
They're going to know people in their Sunday school classes or in their small groups that maybe you don't have a connection with, and we'll add them as well. And quickly, it seems to me, at least within 15 minutes, you can have a list of 30 to 50 people just by getting some other people around the table and saying, okay, who do you know that you just think would be good if they said yes, and begin adding them.
Yeah, I'll usually recommend for folks to shoot an email out to their ministry team. So if they're a youth minister, children's minister, whatever, send out to their team and say, hey, can you send me 10 names of people who you believe would be great to serve in this ministry? Not people you've asked or will have to ask, and not people who you think will say yes or no. Just who do you think would be fantastic to work in this ministry? And then also shoot an email out to the clergy and say, hey, would love 10 people that are on your radar that you would love to see more deeply involved in the church. Right then, I mean, you all of a sudden you'll have 50, 60, 70 names of people that you may have not even thought of.
Right.
And I'd like to point out to our listeners and watchers that nobody has asked anybody anything other than the people who have already been serving. That's kind of the first thing. Like, who's re-upping their commitment for another year? And all of this stuff is just leading up to it. We haven't really made any ask yet for people in that fishing pond. But also, Fred, I just want to add, I think the power of prayer is really important that we not forget. I think the people in your committees, if they're a program committee, a ministry team, who are helping you in this recruiting effort, this really needs to be a prayerful time, and ask others to pray for your ministry and the people who might come to it in order to serve. I know that's a little bit cliche, but I think it's an important thing that we don't forget.
I think that's right.
Ha ha!